Okay, tonight we are working on this 2006 BMW 650. It was towed over from another shop. Basically, it doesn't start. It almost, I guess, like not recognize either key or something. But there is no light up of the cluster, is what I'm told. As far as a little bit of background, I think valve cover gaskets were done. Then it was, I guess, sent to the customer's house, or they picked it up, and the customer themselves attempted to replace the battery, and then doing so almost right after that, I believe, is when it started having problems and it would not start. So this is where we're at with it. All I know is a battery was installed and now it doesn't start. So we'll kind of go from there and see what we find. Okay, so first things first, I'll quickly get you a shot of fresh new battery. I made sure that it was fully charged. It was a little bit low because the vehicle has been sitting. But there's your battery that the customer installed. And then I'll get you a shot of what it does. So we insert the key, a foot on brake, and nothing. We'll pull the key out again, insert it, and nothing. So at this point, I am connected to the OBD, and I'll get you a shot of the trouble codes. And even though the vehicle fully doesn't power up, it is able to communicate with the scanner, and I am able to do a complete scan on it. And as you can see, a lot of modules do come up, and we'll pull up the report to see if there's anything that we would be interested in. So we'll go on the DME. So we got, looks like battery sensor, IBS issue. Let's see, EWS, immobilizer system. But that one is listed as absent, but definitely one that would be related to starting, but weird that it's absent. Let's see, more a battery sensor deal with the BSD. Brake lamp, switch, we have one for that, that's present. Throttle valve, don't care about those for the time being. Okay, and then let's see, in the traction control, nothing crazy. In the cluster, let's see, terminal, receiver, instrument, clutch, transmitter, CAS. That would be one to think about, but again, that one's listed as absent. And here we go with the CAS. This would be a major player in this situation. And there's one trouble code for the ELV, electronic steering lock, external powering. So this vehicle is equipped with an electronic steering lock on the column, which, yeah, makes sense. We would, if it's operational, we would hear it lock or unlock the steering wheel when we insert the key in the ignition. And there's no unlocking or locking that we currently hear. So I would probably venture to say that the electronic steering lock has some sort of issue. So at this point, like we said, looks like the electronic steering lock is what's keeping this from starting. If you scour the internet, you're gonna find countless of things about either bypassing the steering lock or resetting a counter, as well as your silver bullet websites that people use. A lot of it is about resetting a counter. So that is what I'm gonna do and try. Hopefully, quick, easy, reset the counter, and then it'll start. As far as where we do that, or we attempt to, we'll try to at least get that powered up to that point. We'll back out of here. We'll go into the CAS to see if there's something there. I assume active test. Let's try in general. Okay, so apparently what happens is that there's a counter that just incrementally goes up, and it reaches a point where it stops, and you have to reset it. And when it stops, it defaults, it just stops activating and actuating, so it won't let you basically go past ignition key cycles for powering up. So if we reset it back to 0, it'll be able to start counting up and operate normal. So we hit activate to complete, to escape, and then I'll reset this, the main CAS unit as well. And then I actually heard the throttle blade move, and I believe the interlock here activate when it resets. So let's go, let's try to erase codes. Okay, read no codes. Let's see if that does it. We'll pull the key out. I didn't hear any steering lock yet, but I'll put foot on brake. And same deal, no luck. Alright, so at this point, let's see if there's any codes. Nothing yet. Okay, so being that it looks like the code description was some related to powering or voltage supply or power supply, I'm gonna take a look at some of the wiring diagrams. Okay, and here upside down underneath by the steering column to get you a shot of the actual steering lock unit. It's this metal box there, and then the CAS is this white module box, and there is the connector for the steering lock. And I think I might want to tap in there based on wiring diagrams after I look it up, and I'm going to assume there's a little electric motor or something in there that's going to need power and ground, and kind of go from there, see if we can tap in there, see if there's a problem there. Okay, so after quite a bit of time of trying to research and break down the system, understand it, so on and so forth, and checking wiring diagrams and pinouts, I ended up coming up with a plan. Initially, I was wanting to watch the power supply to the electric steering lock and where that power and stuff comes from. And so basically, that is all controlled by the CAS control unit, which is the main, let's call it, immobilizer unit that Also controls a couple other functions related with the key positions, let's call it. I know the diagram is way small, it's just the way it's printed, but this guy here is the CAS control unit. This guy here with the motor signal, that is the electronic steering lock. There's 4 wires. It's you've got a main ground for the unit. You have a power ground for the motor control that go back to the CAS, and then you have a like a sub bus, single wire bus that does go elsewhere. And so I was wanting to tap into there on the power supply and ground and stuff based off of the trouble code, and possibly see if the CAS control unit is faulty and just not internally able to supply either power or ground to it and control the motor. If you go here, this is the pinout. You look on this side for description, steering lock. There's voltage supply, pin 23. Pin 24 is the ground for it. So those are those pins in that diagram. But in doing so, in researching for this information, I ended up kind of getting lucky. I stumbled across a BMW Bulletin that describes this exact situation, and it explains even the same lights that light up on our dash and a no start situation, and actually tells you what the fix is or could be. So let me quickly take you and show you that. It's a lot simpler than what I expected, to the point where I don't have to do much more testing. So Bulletin here describes to unplug this connector, which leads to the battery sensor. If you remember, we had a bunch of DME codes related to the IBS, which is the battery sensor, and the BSD communication or bus faults. And the bulletin explains to unplug this at the connector and see if it starts. If it does, that's your problem. Replace that. So we've unplugged it, and now let's see what we get. If you heard that, that was the steering lock. And obviously it starts up and runs. I, of course, didn't know the condition. I'm not here for that. At least now it runs, it starts and runs. If there's any further testing, that's up to them. But for what we are here for is the starting problem. And there's that lock. So the CAS is good. The steering lock is good. It's not a counter reset problem. It's not a situation where it needs to be replaced or bypassed. It's none of those. The problem is simply the battery sensor. Now, also, if you remember, and I have seen this before, if you're not careful when replacing the battery, and remember, the customer, when they got the car home, attempted to replace the battery themselves. I've seen, if you're not careful and you bang up that negative battery cable too much, I've seen where some of these get damaged or they stopped working, but I've not seen one where it'll cause a no start. And so now at this point, simply tell the customer what they need to buy, replace, and they should have no problem. And so as far as for me from here on out, nothing too crazy, just my curiosity. I want to know what some of those lines look like on the scope based off of what the bulletin explains. So basically what it says is that the vehicle prevents itself from starting due to the fact that the IBS sensor goes bad and affects the wake up line circuit. Now on the IBS, there's two wires. One of them is the BSD single wire bus, and then the second wire is a wake up line signal. So the IBS is on the wake up circuit, and I'll show you that now. This here is all the modules on the wake up circuit, and down here is battery sensor, and basically the ones that are on here is what is described as the PT bus, in BMW terms, the powertrain bus. So it's going to be your important modules for getting the vehicle started, running, driving. You've got traction, you've got a body, let's see, steering column, switch cluster, active steering, dynamic drive, DME, active backrest, transmission, IVM. So a lot of kind of important modules are on this. And if you're not familiar with a wake up bus signal, it is basically, and it's generated from the CAS. The CAS will see the key be inserted into what they refer to as a ZAS, and basically your ignition switch. Once it's inserted in there, obviously it knows you are requesting ignition and key cycling, and once it sees that separately through a ribbon cable down to the CAS, during that request there is a signal that is sent out on this circuit, and it's to notify all these modules to basically, literally, wake up and get ready for action, get ready to operate. That happens pretty quickly, and it gets all these modules going. If you want to determine some of these as faulty, obviously you have to check power, ground, communication lines, and also the wake up line. If one of these individually is not communicating and you have good power, ground, and CAN lines, and you never check the wake up line, if there's a break to the module from the wake up, if it never knows to wake up, it's not going to basically turn on and start operating or be ready to operate, regardless if there's separate power and ground there. So that is the purpose of the wake up circuit. It's kind of an important deal. And what the bulletin describes is that if this sensor goes faulty, it, I guess, almost brings down the signal, or it affects the signal. I don't know exactly yet, and that's what I want to test. But it affects the signal to the point where it prevents the wake up signal to be, I guess, in the correct state. And so I wanted to see how this gets affected. So I am tapped into the, obviously, a wake up line, and I'm also tapped into the power supply line for the motor, just out of curiosity. Okay, and so right now I still have it unplugged to the point where we were able to operate it. I am tapped into those two lines. The blue channel is on the wake up signal. The red is going to be the power supply to the steering lock. So I'll get in, put the remote in the ignition, and see what happens. Okay, so you can see, if you remember, red is the power supply to the motor. If we look, the blue was the wake up signal. That was as soon as I inserted the key. Looks like it went up and came back down, but then the motor actuated, and then I removed the key and the motor actuated, and there was no change in the wake up line. So there is your steering lock operating correctly. There is your wake up signal, and just for curiosity again, I'm going to go ahead and insert the key and actually start the car right now to see if it's a quick up and then down, or if it stays up or what. I'm curious to see what that wake up signal does. So I'll back out. You can start it over and I'll start the car. Okay, we'll stop that. And we clearly see that the wake up signal does something different. So at this point, it looks like we actuate the steering lock first, and then we have activity on the wake up line. And once we crank the vehicle over and get it running, looks like it stays up. And let's see, possibly goes to, so at that point it was at about 12 and a half. Now that we've got that, let's take a look at the two signals, and I'll go back there and plug back in the battery sensor. Right away, we've got a change in voltage state. Let's see. So we're at 9.7 volts with it just plugged in. So I'm going to assume that the CAS is seeing voltage present on the wake up line when it is the one that is supposed to generate the voltage, and the CAS is the one that's preventing any further action, or it can't even create an action on that wake up circuit because there's voltage present on it from another guy, and that is the battery sensor. Just for giggles, I'm going to get in and insert the key just to see if there's any funky weird thing. And I'll get in there and do that now. Keys in. Pushing the button. Key back out. So no change. And as it's going right now, let me unplug the battery sensor and see how easy it is to get this fixed. There we go. It drops out. Okay, so this is a very easy to duplicate problem. It's a true hard faulted state situation where there's a component that's completely not correct. Eliminate that from the circuit, the rest of the vehicle can operate normally. So again, looks like the battery sensor in the back is just faulted, and it sends voltage back up the circuit, and the CAS sees that, and it stops itself, or it attempts to go, and then the two voltage together can't create anything. So that's pretty much it. I'm just confirming, or I wanted to see the states that it puts that wake up circuit in compared to the information on the bulletin. So there it is, very easily rectified, easy to duplicate, easy to scope and monitor, and not much more to it. Okay, and since I can't ever leave things alone, and my mind was just going, or was curious, because this isn't some sort of magic sensor. The other thing about it, it's only two wires. One of them is the wake-up circuit, which is the red wire. The looks like gray wire, that's going to be the BSD single wire bus. And I know from previous other testings and experience that is I think source voltage, meaning, I don't know, 12 volts or so once it's running. I think it starts at 7, 8, somewhere around there, and then goes up, and it's a high voltage, well, not high voltage, but it's a source voltage type of bus. And I'm curious if this guy is taking the voltage from the BSD bus, which I believe is generated or controlled by or whatever from the DME. And it does go to the water pump, alternator, and the oil condition sensor. If you do have BSD faults, you want to look at the battery sensor along with all those to see which one's taking down that bus. But I wanted to just see if this guy is tying those two together some way. And so if it's the BSD that is being used to put voltage on the wake up, I'm going to remove the gray wire off of here. And then I'll plug it back in and recheck. That'll tell me if it is tying those two or if it's from here to here, basically the battery. Not sure if you can see, but okay. So there we go. Let's I'm gonna plug it back in, but let me check the scope. Actually, I'll put you here at the scope. We'll start it. And we are watching the blue channel. Okay, well, I guess we got our answer, which would make sense now you think about it, because the BSD is not up and running, communicating, operational with the key off, so that makes sense. Okay, so there you go. We've got our answer to what's wrong, what the problem is, what the signals look like, how you can fix it. It's not a counter issue. It's not your common faulty ELV lock motor or counter issue or needing a bypass again. This is due to a faulted battery sensor creating an incorrect signal on that wake-up line, which then prevents the cast from moving forward. That's all on this one. We'll let the customer know. Hope you followed along. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.